Growing up in my family felt like living in a script someone else had written. My father was a respected doctor, my grandfather a decorated officer, and every male before me had carved a path of prestige and honor. From the moment I was old enough to understand, my future was dictated to me. I would become a surgeon, just like my father. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a decree. No matter how much I tried to express my love for art, sketching in the quiet corners of our mansion-like home, my passion was dismissed as a hobby or childish indulgence. My father's disappointment was palpable whenever he caught me drawing instead of studying science textbooks. My mother, though gentler, never intervened. It was as if she, too, had long abandoned the dream of making her own choices. As I grew older, the weight of my family's expectations became suffocating. It wasn't just about my career, it was about who I was allowed to be. The clothes I wore, the friends I chose, even the way I spoke, all scrutinized under the rigid gaze of tradition. I wasn't allowed to question it. I was only expected to obey. But deep inside, I knew I was lying to myself. The dream of being an artist burned in me brighter than anything else. Every forced biology lesson felt like a slow death. Every sketchbook I hid under my mattress, a secret rebellion. But how could I go against generations of legacy without being seen as a failure? For as long as I could remember, my future had already been written. My father was a businessman, my grandfather before him, and my great-grandfather before that. "This is your legacy," my father would say, as if my dreams had never existed. I sat in his office, surrounded by portraits of ancestors whose stern faces seemed to judge me. "You'll take over after me," he continued, tapping the desk with certainty. I nodded, swallowing the truth. I didn't want this life. But how could I say that without breaking his heart? Every dinner conversation revolved around business strategies, financial reports, and expansion plans. I tried to listen, but my mind drifted to the things I actually loved: art, writing, anything but boardrooms and profit margins. My mother noticed my silence but never questioned it. She was raised to be supportive, to never challenge tradition. And so I played along, feeling trapped in a future I never chose. One day, I gathered the courage to bring it up. "Dad, what if I wanted to do something different?" My voice was steady, but inside, my heart pounded. My father didn't even look up from his papers. "Different," he repeated, uninterested. "What's there to do outside the business?" I hesitated. "I've been writing. I want to be a writer." The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I had shattered something. He set down his pen slowly, his face darkening. "Writing?" he scoffed. "That's not a career, that's a hobby." My mother flinched at his tone, but said nothing. I clenched my fists under the table. "It's more than a hobby," I insisted. My father's eyes bore into me, his disappointment evident. "You think you can make a living out of fantasies? This family built something real, something solid, and you want to throw it away?" His voice rose, sharp and unforgiving. I had expected resistance, but hearing it felt like being struck. That night I stared at my ceiling, wondering if I would ever be able to change his mind. Since I couldn't win his approval, I began living a double life. By day, I played the perfect son, attending business meetings, nodding along to lectures about profit and market trends. But at night, I poured my heart into my writing. The words flowed effortlessly, giving life to the dreams I couldn't say out loud. I shared my work anonymously online, and to my surprise, people loved it. They resonated with my stories, with characters who felt trapped like I did. For the first time, I felt free. But freedom came with its own burden. Every time I sat at the dinner table, guilt gnawed at me. My father's pride in me was built on a lie. If he ever found out, I wasn't sure he'd look at me the same way. So I buried my success, smiling as he talked about our company's future, pretending I wasn't slowly slipping away from the world he had built for me. It happened suddenly. One afternoon, I left my laptop open, forgetting to close my email. My father had called me downstairs for something, and when I returned, he was sitting at my desk staring at the screen. My heart dropped. He scrolled through my work, his face unreadable. "You wrote this?" His voice was calm, too calm. I nodded, my throat dry. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he exhaled sharply. "And here I thought you were actually focused on your future." I tried to tell him how much writing meant to me, but he wasn't listening. "This is nonsense," he snapped, slamming the laptop shut. "You're wasting your time." His disappointment stung more than I expected. He left the room without another word, but his silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. That night, for the first time, I questioned if my dreams were worth losing my family's respect. Things were never the same after that day. My father barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was only about business. I tried to mend the distance, but every attempt was met with indifference. One evening, he finally spoke his mind. "You have two choices," he said firmly. "Drop this writing nonsense and commit to your future, or leave." His words struck like a hammer. My mother gasped, but she didn't protest. I looked at my father, searching for some sign that he didn't mean it, but there was none. I realized then that to him, my worth was tied to tradition. My dreams didn't matter, only the legacy he wanted me to uphold. I wanted to argue, to make him see that my path was just as valid, but I knew it was useless. That night, I made my choice. I wouldn't stay in a home where I wasn't allowed to be myself. I wouldn't live for someone else's expectations. I started packing my bags. The hardest part wasn't leaving, it was realizing they weren't going to stop me. My father didn't try to convince me to stay. My mother hugged me at the door, whispering, "Be safe," but even she didn't ask me to reconsider. As I stepped outside, I looked back one last time, hoping to see some sign of regret. But the door had already closed. The night I left felt surreal, like I was floating outside of my own body. My mother stood at the doorway, tears in her eyes, her lips pressed together to stop herself from begging me to stay. My father didn't even come downstairs. My suitcase was heavier than I remembered, or maybe it was the weight of my guilt that made it seem so. Every step away from that house felt like a betrayal, but I knew it was necessary. As I walked to my car, I wondered if I'd ever be welcome back. I didn't know where I was going or how I was going to make a living, but for the first time I felt free. The world stretched out before me, full of possibility. I was scared, yes, but more than that, I was finally myself. And that, I realized, was worth everything. I drove for hours, letting the city lights blur into a haze. I had no solid plan, no guarantee that this decision wouldn't end in failure. But what I did have was freedom. The first night in my small apartment was eerily quiet, nothing like the constant background noise of my family home. I laid on the mattress, staring at the ceiling, and wondered if breaking tradition was worth losing the people I loved. The first few months away from home were the hardest. I had imagined freedom to be exhilarating, but in reality, it was terrifying. I struggled to balance work and passion, constantly questioning if I had made the right choice. I missed the familiar sounds of my home, the clinking of my mother's bangles, the distant hum of my father's television. But every time I thought about calling them, I stopped myself. I knew what my father would say, how he would remind me of my selfishness. One night, I found myself outside their house, just sitting in my car. The windows were warmly lit, the shadows of my parents moving inside. It was strange how a place that once felt like my entire world now seemed so distant. I didn't go inside. I wasn't ready to face them yet. Instead, I drove back to my apartment, the ache in my chest heavier than ever. Years passed before I finally stepped back into that house. I had built something of my own, a career, a life that I was proud of. I wasn't the same boy who had left that night. When I walked through the front door, my father was sitting in his usual spot, reading the newspaper. He glanced up, his face unreadable. My mother rushed to hug me, her arms warm and familiar. "You're back," she whispered. My father didn't say anything for a long time. Then, finally, he nodded. "So, tell me about what you've been up to." It wasn't an apology, and I never expected one. But in that small moment, I knew things would be okay. I had broken the mold, defied expectations, but I hadn't lost my family forever. Tradition may have shaped me, but it didn't define me. I had learned that carving my own path didn't mean walking it alone.